was a little different. The spankings were a little bit more aggressive, so I knew the difference between a real spanking and maybe a spanking out of anger. So now you can't spank your kids at all. You can't discipline them at all. Yet law enforcement can come along and discipline your kids with no love whatsoever. So I think that's one thing, because listen, as kids, there has to be something that you don't want to happen at the end of the day, because
Yeah.
kids are just going to push. It's just natural nature. They're just going to push. So there has to be something at the end of the road that they're like, I don't want that, therefore I'm not going to do that. Where there's not too much of that going on now in parenting, so um it's very difficult. And then, like you said, with the internet, I think suicide rates between like 13-year-olds and 19-year-olds have tripled, because you have these people who are just not being honest, on camera, and everybody's looking at them like, wow, I don't have any of that. So it's already a low self-esteem going on, and it makes it even worse. So it's just compounded.
Okay. We're gonna take a quick break. I'm gonna plug in. He'll edit this piece out. So what I'm gonna try to do, I'm gonna try to bring my camera closer and raise my seat up. So because like you can see the difference.
Yeah.
I'm trying to
Yeah.
raise my seat up.
Just wondering also, I just noticed that the recording just started halfway through Flex's thing.
No, I had to hit it again.
Oh, okay.
Q, as tall as you is, your seat got to be damn low, man.
It is. It's like a low rider seat.
Yeah, it's still low.
Yeah.
Or maybe you need to angle your camera downward.
So just off topic, Flex is talking with the friend that helped Neely get her job with that delivery company. He said, you can hear me?
Yeah.
He said she could make about 110, 120 grand this year.
Are you kidding?
Nice, because she got the second best. They loved her so much, she ended up getting the second best route in the company. So she's got like a Costco now that she'll be delivering to, and they get commission.
Wow.
Like, how much were you making at 22? I wasn't making that much.
Are you kidding, dude? Man, freaking at 22?
Yeah.
Oh, well, actually, I was broke. Shoot, that's back when had just moved to Venice, and I was living with this girl, and Rico and Chris were like fight every day on who's going to pay for my lunch that day. I was broke, man. Jeez, gosh, I had no income. I was trying to be a bouncer at Rockberry,
Oh, were you?
and I end up getting in a fight with, I guess, this guy who was well connected, and they're like, they
Oh boy.
took me out the kitchen like, listen, you didn't do anything wrong. Here's some money. Just don't come back. All right. Just don't show your face back around here. I was like, what did I do? You didn't do nothing wrong, but just don't show your face around here no more.
This is just not going to work.
Yeah. So, no. Gosh.
Yeah, I didn't think bread delivery company. She's making that much.
Wow.
But she's got to wake up at like 2 a.m.
Well, you got to get it.
Yeah.
There you go, Q. God dang, you're a monster now. God dang, son.
Yeah, before we were just seeing shit up.
Jeez. Well, I hope that matures are really good.
They were, I mean, she was their favorite for the very, very beginning for a while, and then she started taking advantage of sick days a little bit too much.
A little bit more.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Normally it wouldn't be a big issue, but they said they fire people a lot because it's hard to find people reliable.
Sure.
In that kind of business. So
really.
So they're shorthanded and she's calling in sick. So it's just great stress.
So now I just need to move the camera to that way.
Yep.
Yeah.
Stage left.
How's Chris doing at work?
all this. She's heading up the entire. That might actually be a good show in the future, also for a couple different ones. But she's heading up the entire law enforcement reforms division right now.
Really? Wow.
They tapped her for it because of her campaign,
Mm.
which makes sense, right?
Yeah, definitely.
I'm still now.
That should be a good one
Oh,
for.
just a little high. Yeah,
Yeah,
there
now
you
you're
go.
up. There you go.
There you go.
Might be a good one for Dawn to talk to because that's where she's hitting that sweet spot in a couple weeks, right? Going
Yeah.
to that
Yeah.
bill in Houston.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll pick up from there.
Okay.
So let's talk about the input. My story is a little different from both of you, and it's amazing. I learned more about my childhood and the reason things were by talking and asking probably some uncomfortable questions to my parents. So my input will be my parents and what happened with them. So begin with my grandfather, my mother's father, was an alcoholic and a thief. He went to the store one day and never came back,
Mm.
and left my grandmother with the kids. At that time, she had 3 kids. So after that, she remarried. But the man she remarried was a police officer, eventually chief of police. He was very abusive. So both my grandmother's marriages were physically, emotionally, and physically abusive. Okay. Not saying that she was an angel. I wasn't there. I don't know. But that my mother's side of things was violence, alcoholism, that ran rampant in the area, but more so, imagine your dad going to the store one day and you don't see him again until like 20 years later.
Mm.
My father's side I asked way more questions on my father's side than I did my mother's side, because when I found out he just left, I didn't want to know anything about him. So to this day, I cannot tell you anything about my grandfather on my mother's side, other than I saw him, I think, twice my whole life. He moved to New York, started a whole new family. When he got to the end of his life, he ended up coming back, and the only person that supported him through that process was my mother, the kids that he actually left. I wish my grandmother would have had opportunity to talk to him and see him in that space, to get some closure for her. I mean, for a person to just leave you that way. Now, on my dad's side, my grandfather was extremely abusive. I mean, like extremely abusive. My dad still showed me in the last 5 years or so, he's shown me marks on his body, and particularly on his arms and things, where he was beaten with the butt of a gun, or a shotgun, by my grandfather. Very abusive, beat my grandmother, had 17 kids with one woman. Well, I'm sorry, 15 kids with one woman,
Good grief.
and had, I could be off by one, but had at least 3. No, that's right, because one of them died in here. So it was 18 kids. So 15 by my grandmother, and 2 by his second wife, and another, my thing is, if you got a man, if you meet a man and he has 15 kids, why he can even use the restroom in my house? You go outside.
Wow.
But it's very abusive. So both my parents came from extreme abusive situations. I mean, I even learned later in life, my grandmother had to sleep with a knife, not ice, but we used to call it ice pick,
Yeah.
or personal protection. And you can take your imagination and let it go with that in terms of protecting herself in certain situations. So neither one of them came from a good space. And that's why I say input. That's my input. My input was, both were alcoholics, both was abusive. The court actually awarded my dad to be on his own at the age of 15 because of the violence and everything that was going on. And he used to tell me how my grandfather wouldn't let them go to school. He would make them pick cotton, take the money, go out, get drunk, get put in jail, all kind of crazy stuff. So the interesting thing is we explore the inputs that create men to be the way that they are, and how we adjust address those mental health challenges that we have from various forms. So my father, though he was beaten very bad physically, Vietnam vet, the whole nine. Well, we'll talk about that in another podcast. He only spanked me once my entire life. He spanked me once. He was a very calm man. Most people thought he was mean, but he was a gentle. I mean, he was a gentle guy. I mean, he always encouraged. He was firm. Don't get me wrong. He was a Marine. He was firm, but he would direct us. I can remember times he would have the paper, and we were doing something we were supposed to do. He'll just turn down one end of the paper and look.
Yeah.
Everything stopped.
Yeah.
Back up.
Yeah.
You know, it's just his presence. My father was a very honorable man. Very honorable. There were not nights I came home as a teenager that my dad wasn't up. That's why I never really stayed out late, because I knew he had to work. He wasn't going to bed until I got in. So knowing for me, and I go to bed early anyway, but knowing for me, I was consciously trying to be home by 10 or so, because I knew he had to work the next day. His method was he would sit there in a chair. When I got home, he'd look at me, "You all right?" "Yes, sir." I go do whatever. He gets up, go check all the doors, make sure everything's locked, goes in. And the first face I saw every day was my father's face. And his point behind that, he told me once, "I wanted my children to always know that I was always going to be there. I wanted my face to be the first face they see." Man.
Wow. That's deep.
So I could have had a very different life if he had made the decisions to do differently. He's always supported us, always been kind, encouraging. He always provided. Even when things were bad, I remember he took a job as a janitor over a job that paid a whole lot more money just to make sure we had insurance. Because he was big on my family has to have health insurance. And no matter what happened, to this day, he's always carried life insurance on all of his kids and ended up having to use it for my sister. But the thing of it is that I want people to understand. Sometimes it's just a difference in the choice you make. Think about it. Both my parents. That's why I really don't drink or smoke. Because my dad came from an abusive household, my mom came from an abusive household, whether it was drinking, all that other kind of stuff. He didn't drink. So my dad didn't drink, I didn't drink. My dad didn't smoke, I didn't smoke. My dad is always a very kind man. So in a relationship, that's my mindset. So technically, my input, he told me this. He said, it stops with me. He literally he drew a lane in the sand, a line in the sand, and said, my children would not go to bed hungry. They would not go to bed in fear, and they would have opportunities in life. I do whatever I can to make sure they're protected, they're safe, and have choices. Now, on the other end, right? So my outcome was different. Greg's outcome was different because there was a father. And correct me if I'm wrong, Flex, but your situation was initially different than that. I want people to understand the difference in the father being in the life of their children. It really affects the legacy of. I mean, there's very, very different outcomes when men choose to find a way to be a parent, be present, than it is when they just say the hell with it and leave. What was it like in terms of men in your life, Flex? Let's say before 7, because they say a lot of habits and things develop prior to 7. What was life like before 7 that you can remember?
Yeah, it's hard because me and my father have a great relationship now, but at that time, I don't know what age he left, but I don't ever remember him being in the home. So that's how soon he was gone. Before I was even old enough to know, daddy. Um, so from there, we lived in Fresno, and he moved to Oakland, and we would either he would come down sometimes in the summer, or later on when we got to be like 10, 11, we would take, it's crazy to think, putting kids on a bus, but we would take the Greyhound, you know,
I've
just
been there.
me, my brother, and my sister, 10 years old, sitting on a Greyhound, and we go up there and stay a couple of weeks each summer. So that's the way our life was. And you know, because because like I said, my brother Darnell was just a pure natural athlete, and my dad would always come down during his track meets or his football games. And I got into martial arts that wasn't really school based, so he never came to see me fight. And then when I got into bodybuilding, um, you know, um, again, it's hard, for me to say, but I probably did over 300 shows as an amateur, especially in a Division AAU. Um, the first time he ever came to see me compete is when I won the USA as a pro. That was the first time ever him coming and seeing me compete. He seen me fight in the tournament. Even though I became a incredibly great fighter, he only seen me fight, one time because I made it a point for my older brother to drive me to Oakland to where there was a tournament there,
Right.
and he came and seen me fight, and I actually lost. And we kind of went and had lunch after that, and he drove home, and my brother drove us back to Fresno. So he wasn't really
Q, just to put that in
involved.
perspective, Flex won the USA's in '92.
Yeah, I
That was
started.
the '90s. That
Yeah, I started competing when I was first show I did. I was um, 14. So for almost over a decade, he just wasn't there, supportive in that way. Um, yeah, so you know, um, as we got older, he ended up moving back to Fresno and into the house where, we were being raised, his mother's house, my grandmother. And we started kind of getting closer then. But even then, it was just a weird dynamics. It was weird. I would like walk through the door and it wouldn't even be a hi, it was just so normal. We are just so functionally distant.
Disconnect.
There was just like no hi, or if I'd walk out, it was no hi. It was just like a look up and an acknowledgement, and that was there. Now, you know, um, I was very drawn to my dad. He was tall, he was handsome, he was like cool. I always wanted to like be around him. I always wanted to like sit in his lap or hold his hand, and he was like a man's man. I was like, no, no, you don't do that, I remember a story when I was a kid. He had came down to visit us at his grandmother's house where we had been raised, and he had brought his wife, who ended up being like a real mother to me. And I would always go to her all the time, but I would never go to him because his voice was so deep. And he teased me and offered me some candy. And when I went to go get the candy, he grabbed me and gave me a spanking, like, "Don't you ever run from me again." And that was the only spanking I ever got. It's just, if he just raised his voice, I'm like, what? I'm like at attention. What you need? You got no problems from me. So I was always a good kid, but I knew there was an absent there. So as I became a dad, I just knew I wanted things to be different. I wanted to be loving towards my kids. I'd always kiss them. I'd always hug them. My oldest son, Kenan, I remember he was like 12 years old, and I would still have him sit in my lap at functions and give him hugs and kisses and everything. And I noticed like his friends would always look at him, and I even asked him, I go, does that embarrass you? And he goes, no, no, it doesn't embarrass me, Dad. But I left his mother at an early age, also. Um, and we had to have one of those hard conversations. It was a time I came to pick him up, and he was like, Dad, why did you leave my mom? And I just sat there and just cried. I was like, it was all my fault. I was just immature. I was young. Your mother was so much more mature than me. It was all on me. And he sat there and asked me a few more questions, and he was like, okay, I forgive you. And from that
Yeah.
point on, it was just amazing. We were so close. Even now as a grown up, he will not cuss around me. If he does, he'll like, oops, I'm sorry, Dad. He won't raise his voice towards me. He always reference, like when he has hard times in life, he always reference back to like, I remember you struggling. You never gave up, Dad. That's why I never give up. And
Yeah. The amazing thing about that though is, and I really want men to understand this. It doesn't matter where you are in your life and what your experiences have been. You have to seek reconciliation. Because from my perspective, you can never reach your full potential in life. I don't care what level of success you have, it still won't be at the level it could have been if you were good with your kids.
mm,
That you've done everything on your behalf to try to support. Yeah, you made a mistake, but guess what? Kids, in particular their dads, they are incredibly forgiving. When they get to certain ages of man, this could be a little bit more challenging. But that little boy, I don't care if you're 40 years old, that little boy still wants to know his dad. And that's why I keep saying inputs, and understanding the difference in those inputs. So, Greg, let's say, what's your earliest remember of your interaction with your father?
I remember. I guess this is where my story is so much different because I remember him. I remember being. I might have even been in diapers. I remember him giving me baths when I was a toddler. I still have those memories.
wow.
But just on that side of things, I think that's where my experience is so much different. I mean, it was almost like I had that. People always told me growing up, I have that eight is enough, and that's really referencing something out of literally. I grew up in that eight is enough neighborhood, the 40s in Sacramento. But it was almost like my dad, my mom were there. Almost like it got to the point where I was that kid where like I complained because they were always there. My dad was a coach. Flex, this is going to resonate with you because you see it on my side. My dad was a coach on most of my teams as a kid growing up, soccer and baseball. And here I am. Flex was saying how you're getting involved with your daughter's hockey, and I cornered one of Neely's first fights. So it was just for me. It's just expected. I want to annoy them. I want to be there to the point where they're sick of seeing me, and I think that's for me. That's the way it's always been. But yeah, I remember that. I remember him. The one thing that I would say, Flex and Q, that my mom and dad refused to show up for were my fights back when I was kickboxing. They just didn't want to show up that. But my dad showed up to my first bodybuilding show because he just happened to
Wow.
be in Sacramento. So I remember him coaching me in under-8 soccer all the way to the point where my journey began towards getting my pro card in bodybuilding. The only thing that he skipped in between was the fighting side, but it was harder for them to travel from Sacramento all the way down to Long Beach when I was playing there, but all the way through juniors, they would show up wherever I was playing throughout the state. I would
So
look up, they're always there. And
That's amazing.
it
That's
that's
was
amazing.
so
that's
in my
incredibly
mind,
interesting.
you have to be there for your kids.
Yeah.
So a part of what and we're going to get to this in a moment. A part of this is we want to get an understanding of the foundation of the early years to encourage men of any nationality, any race, any whatever. My daughter was born when I was 39. I have one kid at the age of 39. Her mother and I never married. The big thing for me was I was not going to have a kid and be married.
Mm.
That was not going to happen. And then at 39, he wasn't married. My dad said, "You supposed to do that when you broke, not when you doing okay in life." My mother, it got so bad. My mother was telling me, "Son, do you like girls? Is everything working for you? Is everything working for your body? Do you need to go get tested?" My mother told me, "Hey, I think you shooting blanks." I'm like, "Mom, who says I'm gonna get this?" Man, she was on me. She was on me. But it's understanding the impact of a loving father at whatever point it occurs, and the impact that it has. Like my father, my father never saw me play in high school. He never saw me play in middle school. In elementary school, they came to he came to a game, a couple, some games, and then he saw me play one time in my entire 4 years in college.
Mm.
And looking at reasons why, it's one thing he regrets. I mean, it is one thing that he regrets that he didn't make time for that. His thing was, I got to make sure they're safe. Got to make sure they have clothes, they got food, everything is good around here. And that's what he saw his duty as. He could not relate to my passion and zeal toward the sports. But I saw all of that was my thing is I was going to college. I was not staying in that environment. To me, the amount of money that men were making in that space, I'm like, well, I want to make that in a month, what they were making in a year. So my mother always told me I was going to live far away because I just thought differently. I just saw things differently. And what I hope people can see from this perspective, we go into the stages of the teenage years, is the difference it makes. You have three different people here, three different experiences. And as we go through the next stage, let's just say the 7 to 13-year-old, right? So we have a situation where Greg's parents were very involved in everything that he did. Absolute support. He has, I have memories of my dad, the same type of thing. My dad fixing my plate. My dad said, well, my mom would tell me you better eat on your thing on your plate. My dad would tell me, okay, you come get it. I have a lot of, intimate, important memories of my dad all throughout my life. And that's the theme. Even as you transition to Greg, to me, to Flex, I don't remember my dad ever not being there. Unless he was gone from the military for something. But I can, I say it all the time. I mean, I can't, people ask me why you have so much respect and admiration for your parents. My mother was pregnant at 16, and my dad was sent to Vietnam right after that. My mother was one of the first group of kids that was integrated in the South. And listen to the experience where you have a 16-year-old pregnant kid going through the school and the abuse that she took through that process. And when she died, 7 months ago, just really thinking about all the conversations that we had and ones I still wish you had an experience. They were physically married for 56 years and they were together for 60. So one of the things Flex, is a lot of people can't relate to, is that Greg cannot imagine life without his parents because they always was there.
Yep. Flex will tell you, I only recently lost my father, so it's still weird not to have him walk around the corner.
Yeah, it's so in our minds, we look back over, and this is what I would like a lot of men to really evaluate, because relationships are difficult. We get it. But one of the things my dad always told me, he said, as a father, it's probably the most thankless job.
Mother might outweigh us a little bit.
The thankless job. But he said that your responsibility to your family has nothing to do with how you feel. This has nothing to do with it. He said, your mom or the woman in your life can choose to stop doing whatever she wants to do, says whatever she's going to say. But guess what? Every morning, these are his words. You better get your ass up, go to work, and provide for your family. He said, because you have my last name.
Mm.
So whatever it is, you're responsible for taking care of that child. And I've learned over time from my own personal experience, it's not the money is only a part of it. The time, the
Yeah.
memories, the engagement. And even as my daughter gets older, I cherish those memories, man. I mean, they're all important to me. Is I want to be there. I want to hear her laugh. She's a teenager, so there's some interesting times there, but it's not the easiest thing to handle. So Flex, the 7 to 13, 7 to 13. Let's talk about that stage of life. What was that like?
Um, yeah, I mean, it's just I hate to harp on it, but it just wasn't all good. It just wasn't, back then, you can get paddlings in school, and you know, um, because I couldn't perform well school wise, I would just get tired of getting beat up on a playground from being teased. So I just made a decision that I was going to be like disruptive in class. So if the teacher asked me to come and write something on a blackboard, I would just like cuss at her. Immediately, I get sent to the office. They call my mother. She green lights for me a paddling, so I get a paddling, and then when I get home, I get a beating. And again, my mother grew up in the 40s. She's way more dyslexic than I am. It wasn't. I don't even think they knew what dyslexia was way back then. Um, she was pregnant with kids already, so I vividly remember this time she was trying to help me with my schoolwork. Um, God, it's hard to say. And every time I got an answer wrong, she would hit me. So now I'm timid on even answering, and I remember she just made a comment like, damn it, you're gonna be stupid like me. And I didn't really understand what she meant, but now I get it. But again, I I had those hard conversations and learned what my mother's upbringing was, so I was able to forgive her because I mean, you got kids now that they just give up on their kids. I mean, she was always there. If we got sick, she came to school. If it was a fight out in the front yard, she'd be the first one charging, taking a butt kicking, trying to protect us. She didn't give up on us. We just made a decision to go and stay with my grandmother, my dad's mom, and then she started raising us. So on that side, it was just nothing but love. Eat when you want, eat if you want. Always, you can go in the refrigerator and eat. Where at my mom's house, like, no, what are you doing in the refrigerator? You eat at lunch, you eat at dinner, and you eat at breakfast, and we sit down at the table and you eat what I feed you. And I didn't like the food. It was, you know, traditionally like just soul food, ham hocks and greens and all these like vegetables. I remember trying to stuff my mouth, would go to the bathroom and spit it out, and I'd do it so many times where she finally caught me, and I got a spanking for it. But she was trying to provide. I was just different out of our kids. I was just different. I just didn't like that food where my grandmother literally just she's grocery shop for me. All I ate was peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, just all day long. And her thing was as if you eat, you hungry. And if that's all you're gonna eat, then hey, then go and eat that. I mean, for Christmas, they're making hams and stuff like that, just all the toppings. And I just wanted peanut butter and jelly. And she didn't frown on that. She didn't make me feel bad about it. You know, she was loving, she was caring. She was, like I said, she was, I don't know if people can relate to it unless they're, you know, our age, but she was a real grandmother. She had that real grandmother knowledge. It was just no lying to her. It was no getting away with things. You couldn't bring a girl over. She'd take one look at the girl like, get her out of here. She ain't no good. And I'm like, grandma, you get her out of here, you know, and you know, I praise her. She passed away when I turned pro. Um, and she came to one of my bodybuilding shows, just one. And she was like, "Ooh, you look like a greased up pig," you know. She was as old. She was born in 1909, you know, but my grandmother taught me some incredible things. You know, she was born in 1909. So you gotta imagine what she's seen. You know, she's
Yeah,
seen all of tar and feathering, you know, people hung with their Johnsons in their mouth and all that. And she
The
just always
Titanic.
taught me, you know, she was like, Kenny, there's no such thing as black and white. There's just good and bad people.
right.
And you know, she cleaned homes for white people for a living. And
So my grandma.
so she just didn't see that, you know, she knowing that she grew up in a racial charged world where people were killed for opening their mouth. She's like, it's just good and bad people. It's just evil and good. That's it. And that resonated with me. So I was never racist. You know, I even when my grandmother passed, I didn't do certain things that my other family members did because I just had so much love for her. It's
Right,
like I can't let her down.
right.
Uh, just certain things I just couldn't allow myself to do. It's like, wow, I know I'm not all good. You know, I know my grandmother ain't proud of some of the things I've done, but I'm not going to do that. And I was all because of her. You know, so it was a very, you know, unbalanced life on her side. It was just happiness and love, and we didn't have much. I mean, she would, you know, walk from the block from taking a, you know, she had to walk a mile after she took the bus to get to the house where she would clean it and walk a mile back. And she would come home with 2 bags of groceries from the bus, you know, and, you know, we didn't have a lot, but it was just like you said, it was just so much love that it replaced that, you know. You know, she just tried to do the best she can with what she had. So, you know, I was able to see both sides of that lifestyle, and I was aware of it, and I was very conscious of those things. So that was kind of, you know, my 7 to 13, you know, and then, you know, unfortunately, right around that age, I got a girl pregnant and had my first daughter, and you know, for whatever reason, I was just so embarrassed because here we are, we don't have nothing, and I'm bringing down this upon my grandmother. And I was just so ashamed that I mean, it was just pure evil, but my first thought was just go and take my life.
Okay,
And
I want to stop there for a second. I want to come back. That leads us directly in to where we're going. And I want to hear that same thing from Gray because what like you the whole racism piece, you know, it's a tough thing for me because we're around military all the time. So a lot of people in the military, not all, but most of them have a different perspective. You know, particularly when I was in high school, you know, I had Korean across the street, you know, somebody from Panama, you know, there, and then, you know, whites there, and then, you know, you just always different people. Vietnamese, just always different people. So I really didn't see it that way. But it is I want people to, as you go through this process and pay attention to what we're trying to accomplish here, is it goes back to input again. You know, you learn what Greg's experience were, learn what my experiences are, learn about flexing. You can see um, different opportunities, so to speak. And I'm gonna ask that question of Greg, but before that, keep in mind, Flex. My first question is going to be when we come back. Did anybody talk to you uh, about sex, about
Hmm.
protecting yourself,
Hmm.
about making sure certain things happen before that occurred? But
Hmm.
when we come back to, that's where I want to start. So,
Gotcha.
Greg, 7 to 13, what was that like?
Same thing. It was school, sports, movies, summer camps, vacations.
Yeah, the life.
I had the ideal kid's life. I mean, fortunately or unfortunately, the way you want to look at it. But
Fortunately.
like I said, there was no excitement to think of. I mean, the things that we could have spoke. I mean, Flex talked about his grandparents and what his parents went through. I mean, the things that my grandparents went through on two opposite sides of a world war. And then, one side immigrating here, what my mom had to go through that whole process of becoming an American citizen, and my dad going through the whole Vietnam thing and his, at that age, um, after actually being, interned during World War II himself. He was born a year before the civilian exclusion order, where the Japanese Americans on the West Coast were ordered into relocation centers. So he basically grew up. I mean, I asked for his growing up. He grew up in an internment camp in Arizona.
Hmm.
Without, in that case, without his father, because his father decided to go and fight in the war for the country that just interned his whole family. Um, so
Oh, time out. So his father went to fight in the war for the Americans while his family were in a camp.
I think that's part of what that was instilled in my DNA, I guess, or our culture, was they were thought of, you know, the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. The civilian
Right.
exclusion order was signed. They were put into camps, and this was their way of saying that they're called the Nisei, the second generation Japanese Americans. This was their way of saying we can be just as good of an American as everybody else out there. So we're going to prove it. So, the ones who were in the 100th Infantry in Hawaii who were already active or reserves, they were rolled in together with anyone who would volunteer at that point, and it became the 100th and the 442nd, which, if you look in your history, was the most decorated unit of its size and length and age in the history of the United States military. Their idea was, we're going to go out and prove ourselves.
Hmm.
But they left, their families were broken, were taken away from what they knew, put in these internment camps throughout the Western United States. The men decided they needed to go prove a point for their future generations that we belong, we are Americans. So they left their wives and their children's in these camps to go fight a war in Europe. Some of them
Yeah.
went to the Asian theater for the Pacific theater to work in intelligence, but they wouldn't allow them to fight in alliance because they look too much like the enemy there.
Hmm.
So let me ask you this, Flex. What can you, I'm gonna come back to you, Greg. What can you tell me about your grandfather?
Which one?
I was talking to Greg, Flex.
Oh,
Um, my on my mother's side, because they came from a broken home, I never knew who my grandfather was on my mother's side. On my father's side, yeah, because like I said, we were raised in that house. Um, he passed away at an age where I barely have any memory of him. I remember always asking my grandmother, what was he like? And asking my dad, what was he like? But I can't even form, a interaction with him because he passed away at such
At a young
an
age.
early age. Yeah.
Hold on, he gonna cut this piece. I gotta plug in. So one of the things I found interesting is that you think about it. So Flex grandfather, very, he passed away at a very young age. Um, Greg can tell you all about his grandfather.
all four of them.
all
Okay.
four of them. He can tell you about that because it was important as a part of his family history to share that information.
Q, as
But
to just symbolize how important it is, Flex knows about my grandparents.
Yeah. Yeah.
so, and this is the thing, I really want, and this is specific to African American men. Okay. And I get it. Our transition was different than the Japanese American, the way other people came to America. So there's a direct relationship and a pride attached to the country of Japan. And the communication and the pride that goes from one to the next. The Japanese culture, by no means am I an expert at all, not the slightest bit, but we do understand it's a sense of pride. It's a place of dignity. It's a place of honor, right? And that reigns through. I think one of the things, particularly as it's kind of unexplainable, the things that as a people that we've gone through, but that doesn't excuse how we must proceed to go through in the future. But this dialogue is necessary because we're heading into the piece that I want to talk to next, that gets to the bigger thing that really we want to try to provide outlets for youth for. And that is, Greg, were you ever spanked by your parents?
No.
What was your form of discipline?
That look. I mean,
Wow.
I got the typical TV groundings and everything else, privilege taken away. Usually, the worst I would do is I get like B's, so that'd be a grounding for a couple of weeks. But no, I was the Boy Scout kid. I would rarely. I mean, there wasn't any other reason to really come down on me for anything. But if we were out of line, we were too loud in situations, we would get that. I characterize it as the Mr. Miyagi look that my dad would give. And you smile because you know what I mean, right? It looks like a ninja looking back here, like he's going to kill you if you don't stop. So that's all it was needed. So there was never any physical repercussions for any of our actions, regardless. So no, I never experienced any of those things.
Was
Now
there?
So not saying that it's not in our culture.
So correct me if I'm wrong, then there was probably a lot of directing and redirecting by your parents for as far back as you can remember. There was
Absolutely.
consistency in redirecting. You do this, you don't do this, just that constant engagement. So Flex, did you?
He's already smiling.
What was discipline like for you as a teenager or even preteen?
I seen both sides of the coin. Like I said, my mother had true mental issues, and she was just a kid. I think like at 21, she had already had 5 kids,
Wow.
and she's trying to raise us all on welfare. We all live with her. So, you have to understand the time and how difficult that was. And, some of us was rowdy. I wasn't. She always, talked about me as the kid who just, if like, and I remember like somebody would do something and she would line us up like who did it. And it would be a spanking for each one of us until who did it. And then it's all over. Each one would get a spanking. And I would finally just raise my hand no matter what and said I did it because I didn't want it to continue. So I would take the last spanking and that would be it. So, but there was times where I felt I was being spanked out of anger or because life was just so hard for her, and I knew every time my grandmother gave me a spanking, I deserved it, and it was love. I knew that, even though I'd be mad and talking under my breath, I knew I deserved it. Where there would be times where I just felt that, my mother just would break down and it would lash out, and we would have to catch the brunt of that. So, that's why I know there's a difference between spanking a kid in love and spanking a kid out of anger or disappointment or some type of setback. You can just feel it as a child.
Yeah. And I experienced some of that. I mean, there's no question. I experienced some of that. Like I said, my dad spanked me one time. That was more of, he spanked me one time. He never spank anybody else ever. But I got some of that. I definitely got some of that. And I remember getting a spanking one time. I mean, I absolutely did not do it. Absolutely did not do it. And I got spanked for it. She got very, very upset because I wouldn't cry.
Mm.
And just silent.
It's like,
She
you gonna
spanked me.
cry. Yeah.
She spanked me. She started breathing hard. But I refused. I was like, I don't care how many times she hit me. I didn't do it. I'm not crying. And my friends to this day, when my buddy one of my buddies that witnessed it just passed away. And I remember one day she told me to look after my sister. And my family at that time had no boys. So I had to play with everybody else who would cross the street, up the street. And she would always tell me not to leave the yard. So here you have this little kid who have no boys in his family. He has to stand there and look across the street at the park, or his friends out where everybody is playing football or baseball or, doing whatever. And I just got to sit there and watch. So I made a decision very clear. I said, you know what? Beating lasts 5 minutes and I can play all day. So I just,
Man,
I would just go play all day.
Different mentality. Wow.
Come home, get my beating, whatever.
Wow.
Whatever. One day I was supposed to watch my sister, and I was across the street playing, and my sister got out in the street and got almost hit a car. Everybody was and my mom ran out. You supposed to be watching it. She went and cut these tree branches, braided them together, beat me with them in front of everybody, went and got another one and beat me again. And I got teased about that my entire life. You know what I said? She didn't get a hit. I got to play. That was just my mentality. Hey,
Wow.
we all made differently. We all made differently. I definitely got spankings. I got spankings. Mostly 99% of them were by my mom. And sometimes they were frustrations of life. Like I said, they were married for 56 years, but anybody knows a relationship is not always that. And she came from an abusive space. So my dad's experience was not to do so. My mother's experience was, if you breathe wrong, you might get beat with you might get beat with a shoe. But they came out of a place of abuse, right?
Yeah.
They both came from spaces of abuse.
Yeah.
My mother handled it differently, and I was the recipient
Yeah.
of most of that. I'm the oldest, so I was the recipient of most of that. I told my sisters, many times, my younger brother, I took a lot of beatings for you guys, But it leads us into two things. Number one, Greg, did your parents ever talk to you about?
No, I know where you're going with this one.
So what made you decide or figure out to be as responsible as best you knew how when it comes to not having children at a young age?
I realized how much they were spending on me, and I wasn't making that much then. So just logically said, it's not, just be very, very careful. It was not hard to figure out the other part of it, but we weren't, none of us grew up in the 50s or 60s as teenagers. So
Right.
There was a lot more information that was readily available even before the internet that you can kind of piece things together. Plus, you had friends and there was locker rooms. But other than that, it was just not something. I grew up with that mindset is, you graduate high school, you go to college. In my family, you go to graduate school also. So that's taking me up through 24, 25.
Right.
And then you get a job. So, I mean, I didn't have my first child till I was in my early 30s either. And I don't know, as far as I know, it didn't even really come close to any oops before that. So,
Wow.
Yeah. I know my parents talk to me about it all the time. Like I said, my mom was 16 in the South in the, in the 60s, grew up there in the my dad was born in 48, my mom was born in 52. But I heard that I don't remember not hearing,
oh,
you better not have a kid. They
Mm.
literally told me, if you have a child, whatever the age that is, whatever we're giving you, you do not get it. We're going to support the child that you brought into this world. You on your own.
Mm.
You're on your. I mean, I constantly hate you. My dad was adamant. My mom was adamant. High
well, I think for
school.
me, it was a girl who I grew up with since kindergarten. She got pregnant in our senior year of high school. And she was, I mean, she grew up in the same neighborhood, same upbringing I did. And it just that kind of was the scared straight for me, I guess. I just wasn't going to have that happen. So,
My thing is, I did not want to stay in that community, and it was very clear that if I had a child, I was trapped. I was trapped. My father would have physically restrained me from leaving that town.
Mm.
just put it out there. If any of our three children are watching this, none of you think of you as a trap. It's just our situation would drastically change how things happen.
Mm.
Exactly, dude.
Love
So
you, Neely, Riley, and Kendall. I love you today.
so we're girl dads. We had to dress that easy. I got if you had a son, they'd just probably laugh about it. The girls, you got to make sure. Because I've had those conversations with my daughter. So believe me, it's yeah, she
Wow.
knows she's my world. The so Flex, were there any conversations? Were there any even hints to you do this happens?
No, no. And, how, I was, introduced to sex was, I was molested at the age of 5, um,
Hmm.
by my 2 babysitters, and then throughout just my, childhood, I just for whatever reason, I just continuously got molested by women, in my family. Um, and it really, you know, I'm sure we'll get into it how our childhood plays into our adulthood, but it really warped my brain because here I am, I'm just this, insignificant little person, and these adults are like interested in me in this way, and I'm like, why? And when I did start to have a girlfriend, I remember asking my dad. It took all the guts in the world, but I was like, Dad, could you please buy me some condoms? And he was like, No, boy, you don't need that. And it just like at that point, I just knew never to bring sex up again with him. So yeah, I went to the liquor store and just tried to figure it out on my own. But going back, my first child I had, I I get it wrong. I guess if I was to count my daughter's age, I could get it right. But I think I was around 14 or 15 years old, and the girl was a little bit older than me, and if it was reversed, it would be statutory rape. But we know that the world doesn't look at it that way when it's a woman that's older than the child. And like I said, because of me shaming my grandmother, and I knew better. It's the first thought that popped in my head was like, go take your life. And I remember how the intercourse happened. Um, it was weird. She invited me over, and it just happened. And like her family was in a front room, and we just walked into her bedroom, and it happened. I didn't really understand, what happened, and I left, and I only seen her like a few more times. And I remember her telling me like she was pregnant, and I was like, huh? What are you gonna do? And she was like, I'm not gonna keep it. I'm like, okay. And she was like, will you go with me? And I was like, no, I won't go with you. And then I guess she got afraid and she just didn't go. And I heard a rumor, around town that she was pregnant. And I remember getting on my moped and riding to her house, and it was storming. And, she opened up the door and her belly was just like large. And I'm like, who's that? And she's like, it's yours. And she slammed the door in my face. And I was like, wow. And it's really odd how, like, some people can go through the worst thing in life and never think about taking their life. And then other people, it's just triggered. And I just remember I was just sobbing like, wow, I've embarrassed my grandmother. Here we are, barely have anything, and now I'm putting this on her, and I remember like the off ramp of a freeway. I remember driving up the off ramp onto traffic and sitting there on the side of the freeway. And it's really odd how at such a young and immature age, I was so calculated on how I was doing this. I was like, okay, well, I can't pull out in front of a car because the car would still be able to stop in time, even though it was raining. And then I'm just going to get a beating, from everyone all the way back home. I was like, okay, I got to wait for a diesel because the diesel is brakes are going to lock up, and it's going to skirt for a while. And I kept looking at these diesels and trying to get the empower myself to do it. And I just couldn't. And I remember, riding back home, just beating myself up more. Now I understand just the evil part of that. But I'm like, geez, you can't do nothing right, dude. You even got this girl pregnant. You can't even kill yourself. You don't deserve to be here. What can you do right? All the way home, and walking into the house, I was sobbing, but because it was raining and I was drenched, nobody asked me, what's going on. And it just triggered just when things got bad to just think of, taking my life. And I just manifested through the rest of my life until probably approximately 2 years later, where finally, my Father in heaven just took that that demon off of my back. But throughout my entire career, I just, from not being smart, you know, I had like no confidence in myself, and learning at a young age that people would take advantage of you. Women, just took advantage of me. So when I started competing and having somewhat of a body, I just thought, hey, it's just normal just to have sex and just have sex with just random people. And then I remember thinking, well, you guys took advantage of me my whole life. Now it's my turn, to take advantage of you guys. And it was just a vicious cycle. But again, it's really interesting how your childhood kind of plants seeds in your adulthood, and it affects you tremendously.
And there's no ifs, ands, and buts about that. You know, as I going through, I do a prison ministry and I work in recidivism. And as I go in the prison and I talk to these different guys based upon where they are, um, they're like kids again, man, in certain frames, certain sex. In other sex, prison is very violent.
Mm,
It is beyond violent. It is It's beyond war. It is in many spaces, it's just actually it's where you send people to become criminals.
Yeah.
This is really what it amounts to. It brings you out.
Gladiator school.
It's almost, prison is almost you got to be savage in certain
Survival.
situations. Yeah. And it forces you to choose a side. Choose a side. But a lot of those is they go through certain situations where, a lot of people are broken, but a lot of those who are able to get through, everything goes back to the childhood. Everything, I mean, even, my stubbornness, right? I'll tell you absolutely 100%, a lot of the success I've had in life and a lot of the failures I've had in life is just sheer stubbornness. There's just certain things in life. I'm just, no, it's not. Hey, I don't care what happens. It's not going to be this way. I don't care how to figure it out. It's not going to be this way. So as you can see, we all have very different inputs when it comes to our 0 to 7, and say, 7 to teenage years, very different experiences. I remember for me, when I was attempting to engage in my first experience, I'm all excited or whatever, I'm trying to join the club with everybody else in school. And I'm just fired on. It was pre-playing, all this other kind of stuff. She was older than I was. And man, we got to that space. All I could hear was, "You better not get nobody pregnant. You better not get nobody pregnant." All I could hear was my freaking mom's voice.
Wow.
All I could hear is my mom's voice. And she already had a kid. She was older than me, but she already had a kid. And in that space, I just started to think, there is no protection. I had had the same condom in my wallet for like 3 years. Don't even know if it would have worked. But all I could hear was my mom's voice and my dad saying, he said, "I work hard to make sure you guys have a better opportunity than I had." And he looked me in my eyes many times and say, one of the things that can happen in your life that can really make it very difficult, right? That you're not going to do if you have children at a younger age. And I backed out of the experience.
Mhm.
I literally backed out of the experience, didn't go forward with it because I couldn't get my damn mom's voice out of my head. But all I could see, she already has one kid. We don't have any protection. She has no idea what she's going to do with her future.
Mhm.
It just didn't make sense to me. I wasn't willing to take the risk. Not saying I didn't take the risk later in life, but in that space while I was in high school, it just wasn't an option. Now, all this brings us to the space of I want to get to the physical abuse part because, I got some pretty bad spankings, even to the point that I was tied to a chair. I got some pretty serious beatings. And I look at things of the people today because I'm dealing with situations with my daughter's friends and with other people in the community where the level of is child abuse.
Yeah.
It's absolute child abuse. I mean, our most recent situations, at least as far as a couple of days ago, I'm going back and forth with my daughter on the phone. A mother, very stressful situation, is literally physically beating her daughter. Beat her all the way down the stairs. She's bleeding. The other sister and the other sister is watching it. I mean, and it's just series of stuff that I know that has happened, and my daughter communicates to me because check this out. I send my daughter to therapy to get input from the therapist on how she can help her friends. Some of her friends. We have a therapy session we're going to tomorrow, and the whole thing is about what my daughter can do to help her friend who's being physically abused. And you learn about, the young lady has been sexually assaulted multiple times. Father's is a drug addict, not in her life. but supposedly call the police. Mother has a boyfriend that has pulled a gun on them. She feels creepy about it because, you know, she say he looks at her and make comments about her underwear. And guys, this is not an ignorant woman. This woman she's very well educated, lives in a very nice neighborhood, very nice home. But then all this anger, all this anger, and the kids don't have an outlet. So what worked for you, um, Flex, in terms of dealing with the challenges of your life? What worked for you to kind of, because you had situations where you had to fight, all kind of things happen in school, had to deal with the whole bullying part. So you have situations today where kids are being bullied in school, bullied at home.
Mm-hmm.
Social media is not the best. So my hope and my thoughts were, what advice can you give? And I want to hear from Greg specifically because he's done an amazing job with his girls. But what can kids do in this stage? I mean, what do you do with this? Even as a parent, observing and hearing about these things that's happening with your friends, children's friends. What do you do? I mean, do I call CPS? Do I call 911? I don't even know where the kid lives.
Mm.
But I do know, I believe that athletics, I do believe that engagement in something gives them a space to deal with it better. But I mean, what recommendations do you have? Because these kids started having from those spaces suicidal ideations. They start to devalue themselves.
Yeah.
And then in school, they label them as this and label them as that. Because even with you, they labeled you as a certain thing. And as our teachers deal with our kids, they're seeing the kids with the behavior, but they don't look at what is the root cause.
Yeah.
What is the root cause? Because it's not normal for kids to behave the way they're behaving.
Yeah.
There are a lot of situations. So what are your thoughts? I mean, what advice can you give or suggestions you can make around what did the kid do?
Me or Greg?
You first, Lex.
God, man, that's different because my outlet was my grandmother. I mean, my mother allowed me and my sister and my brother to go live with my grandmother. So we were taken out of that environment. Um, and like I said, it was completely different. Live with my grandmother, so that was my outlet. And again, I give her all the credit in the world for me not being a worse person, for me not being in prison. You know, in some of these situations now that I hear about or have talked to kids about, they don't have one. And like you said, sports, yeah, well, sports is not even like a possibility because they just don't have no money. Just can't, it's like, you know, both situations, but when I grew up, I didn't know anything beyond my block. My block was it. I just, from my block to my grandmother's block, that was my whole world. I didn't know nothing beyond that. And it's it's out of control now with parents truly abusing kids. And in that situation, as men, as protectors put on this planet, we have to step in. And that's going to infuriate that parent, but um we have to think about the child. And there's so many triple standards because we know that there's so many foster homes that these kids go into, and it's just amplified.
Yeah.
So it's like, are you taking this kid out of the fire and putting him into the furnace? it's we just have a broken system now. I truly don't know the answer. I know, wow, if they're being beaten to the point of blood, geez, you just gotta step in, you
Yeah.
know. You have to step in, but then what do you call in child protective service? It's not like back in our times where they really cared. Now these people, it's just a job. They don't care about the kid no more. You have families now that take in kids just because of the money and they abuse the kids. But you know, I'm just lost uh, when it comes to that. Uh,
So I'll ask our audience, this is something that we're going to revisit because it's a domino effect.
Truly,
And many people want to create a better situation or saying that, whether it be education or whatever, the people not being on welfare and doing these all type of things. You look at the foundation of this. They're born, they come into a situation where they are mentally, emotionally abused. And then they're supposed to go to school and try to learn,
yeah,
right?
not
And then that's a
possible.
space of being bullied. And I'm not going to say, but many of the teachers. Let me ask you. This would be an interesting statistic that I'd like to have feedback on. Not now, but I wonder how many teachers went to school to be teachers, and how many educators are in education because they could not find an opportunity
Feel
Well,
in their field.
actually, I'd like to jump in on that one because I would just personally, I don't think very many because it's a very structured process as an undergrad and then getting your teaching credentials. So that's something that they chose to do, knowing it's thankless and not well paid. But just going back to your other situation, even taking out any kind of physical abuse or emotional abuse whatsoever, one of the biggest predictors of success for children over decades is the zip code that they were born into.
Yeah, that's how you
Because
determine how many prisons they're going to build.
Yep. And it for one, I mean, one of the main reasons is the way that we fund public schools and public schools is under attack anyway. But the way we fund it is by property taxes. So you have something like in my situation where I live in San Jose, where the property taxes are going to be high because the home values are high, the schools are going to be better funded. So you're going to have the situation there. I mean, going back to where I grew up in Sacramento, I didn't know anybody who had divorced parents. Everybody at every sporting event, their mother and father was there. Like I talked about my dad and my mom being there, everybody's parents were there. Everybody's parents showed up to the school plays. Everybody's parents showed up
Oh,
to
time out.
yeah.
Yeah, and this is what our audience understand. That again, it's the input. The input.
yeah, and the
So
support.
by us as men being irresponsible, I'm not granted, there are situations where it's not the man's fault. That's what the general public would say. My father would say it's always the man's fault
Mhm.
because unless a woman put a gun to your head, right, or took advantage of you in some way, you being a minor, it's decisions you made, the action that you took to put you in the situation that you're in. But like he said, in his situation, and I would say they had a lot to do with the decisions I made in life. There were not a lot of divorced people where I grew up. My
Mhm.
mom, my dad's, it's interesting, my dad's sisters and brothers, I mean, they were married forever. I mean, it just wasn't a common thing. I don't even really understand, two parent, not living together, co-parenting. I
Mhm.
really didn't understand and knew what that was until I got in college.
Right.
That was
Where I
And
everyday
that's
life for me. It
for
was
me,
it
that's only
was
one factor though, also, because then you have to go into income situations to where, it- are are they able to be around as much because they have to work more than one job to make ends meet?
That's an impact.
On top of that, or do they have health care? On top of that, even though they're making ends meet, they're not homeless, let's say, what is their food situation like? Are they food insecure? That's all going to factor into a child's success at school. and not knowing those things. Like, my daughters right now, they could just pull things up on their phone. They know they're going to be provided for. It's never a stress. Just not knowing that will negatively affect your scholastic abilities. So right off the bat, you're putting kids at a disadvantage, and that just compounds generation after generation. And that's why, I get in arguments with people all the time about reparations for African Americans at this situation, because this has been cascading for hundreds of years as a culture. I can go back, I can trace my lineage hundreds of years, literally. I know exactly what my great great grandfather did on my mother's side. I know his name. I know what he did for a living. African Americans had that. If you came here, if your last name isn't something that's fully African, if it's Wheeler or if it's Jackson or Jenkins or anything along those lines, that was not your name that your ancestor had. You don't know, because that was, I hate to constantly.
Slave name. It's a slave name.
Yeah, it was your slave master's name.
Mhm.
And it was ripped from you. And it's like, the border jumped the Mexicans in California, because where I live right now, this used to be Mexico. They didn't jump the border, it jumped them.
Mhm.
And just like Malcolm said, how many years ago, you didn't arrive on Plymouth Rock. Plymouth Rock.
Arrived on you. Yeah.
There's a lot of people say that, the Mexicans are not immigrants, they're migrants.
Yeah. I mean, you look at so many things, LA, San Jose, those are all Spanish names,
San Mateo, San Leandro.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I remember, like in California, there was these bills, they're all rusted and everything, but that's how they traveled and all that stuff. But I mean, Greg is right. It's like I said, even in my time is difficult, but it's worse now. But it starts before the child was even born. They're behind enemy lines. It is an old saying that you're born on the other side of the railroad tracks, downtown, uptown. But you do the interesting thing, and here's why I am with parenting is the interesting thing is you do have some kids who come from just the most unthinkable life, and they excel, they're outstanding, they're not a criminal, they make it and they go to college and they're able to change things. And then you have kids who come from just wealth and they want to be ghetto and they want to sag their pants and
That
drugs and
happens a
all
lot.
that.
That happens a
So
lot.
so my thing, what I've come to understand is it's your parenting to a certain degree. But once, in my mind frame, once a child becomes of age where they know right from wrong, a parent is just a supporting cast, because that child then has the ability to know that my parent is telling me to do one thing, but I want to go do this. And it's no longer what the parent can do. Like Mike Tyson said, my sister, there were teachers and all that, but the streets just called me, man, and I answered. So how is that where you can have just millionaires and their kids are just slum ghetto murderers? And then you can have kids who just don't even come from nothing. They come from, a foster system, and they come and they make it. It's at some point it's on the child of what they want. I just knew, hey, listen, I grew up with gangs, drugs. I just knew I didn't want no part of that, man.
I get it. I totally get it.
I'm like, I don't like how my life is. How am I going to go rob and take something from somebody else and make them feel what I'm feeling? That was never appealing to me. Um, Yet you have other kids in the same predicament as me, is like, they'll go take yours, they'll go rob your house, they'll go beat you down. It's that child, it's that individual's choice. Now, yeah, for some kids it's even harder. Like I said, I did have an outlet so I could see a different side of life, but you have some kids who just don't. It makes it far, far, far more difficult, especially when it's compounded from generation to generation to generation. Your parents broke that mold, Q. They broke that mold of being abusive kids. I mean, parents. Your dad broke that mold. He said it stops with me. One thing with me is, so I'm like, I broke that mold with how my parents were. I'm like, it stops. It's not going to continue. That's not going to happen on my watch. But
Right.
then you have that child that you just provide and you do everything for, and it just like it's just a voice that they hear that's dark, and they just run to it. And you're left as a parent. Me and Kennan's fine. Me and her mother, his mother, we're fine. Me and Madeline, we're still raising our youngest daughter who's 17, and we just constantly like wonder, what did we do wrong?
Oh my God, is Pearl 17 now?
Yeah, she's 17,
All right,
man.
Yeah, my daughter will be 17 next month.
just jumping
Yeah,
in on that one though. I mean, I'm not trying to say it's not. We don't have some responsibility on our side of things, but I think it's a systemic situation as well. Because if you look at other industrialized, developed countries, their upbringing system or their system that's in place, schooling and everything else is completely different. I mean, there are nations that call teachers, they're paraphrased as nation builders because they know that they're forming,
yeah,
shaping the generation to come. So there's a
yeah.
lot. I mean, the children. I mean, who is it? Michael Jackson said the children are our future, or whoever it was that sang that back
But
in the.
it's true.
We're not putting them, all of them, and every single one is worthy of this of the effort. We're not giving them the effort and attention that they need to thrive going forward, and we're putting in systems in place that make it more difficult. And
Sure,
that doesn't help when the parents are already gone through the situation as well.
sure.
So
Even like some of the tests that
yes,
they have designed in school, it's designed
the
for us to
standardized test.
fail. Yeah. So it's, I just always believed, even like becoming an athlete and being able to speak on all these different platforms around the world, I just like always have said teachers should be the most highest paid. They're like educating our new future, our new presidents, our new, I mean, how could you
They
not
spend
invest
more
in that?
time with your kid. Do you think about it? They spend
Yeah,
more conscious hours with your children than you do
yeah.
because they got 8 conscious hours of them, and you don't.
And
And if
I've
we
always been aware of traveling. I can't remember what number we are, but we're one of the lowest when it comes to education.
Yeah,
We just don't pour back into our system. And, not to get into politics now, it's even worse now where they're even trying to take that away. They're trying to take away our colleges,
but
and defunding our schools.
if you look a little bit deeper at that, when you look at the standardized scores by states, it's not the same either. So some of our states rank up there with the Asian and European states or nations on test scores. And there's some of our states that are graduating high school seniors that can't read. They're pulling all the standardized average scores down for the United States. But if you take, and you know what, Flex, you know me, I'm political as all hell. So
Sure, of
if you
course.
take some of the more democratic run states like Massachusetts, their reading comprehension and math scores are up there with China's.
Mm,
Then you take Louisiana, and we're barely scratching the surface with some underdeveloped countries.
right.
So, and then you take the average, right? You have, it doesn't matter if your leadoff hitter is hitting 300, if everybody else is hitting under the Mendoza line, your whole team sucks.
you're right. You're
So,
right. You're right.
the investment is not there, but the thing is still, this is in the simplest form, particularly in minority communities. I would say more so the African American demographic. We have just way too many single mothers that's having to be just taking on all the burden. They're not built for that.
Yeah.
I get the women's lib. I get the we can do all these other things, but the average woman wants a responsible man in her life. They don't want to have to make all of those decisions. They don't want to have to pay for everything. Even as a man in my business, a part of my growth, I tell my team, I'm like, look, I can't make all the decisions. If I have to be a part of every decision that's made, I only can make so many good decisions within a day. and a mother that has to constantly do everything. Everything is very, very, and I don't think it's right. Okay, and I think that's one of the biggest challenges that leads to some of the abuse that we're seeing is because of that. But in that same breath, at some point, not trying to be offensive to anyone, but at some point, there has to be a level of responsibility on your engagement and who you choose, and how many children that you have, and that whole scenario. There's a mentality that I won't say it out loud right now, but at some point, you have one. Okay, got it. You have two. Okay. But when you keep going on and on and on, the same type of scenario with different fathers in different situations, and it's your fault. It's
Yeah.
your responsibility because you know you're making the same decisions. You're not respecting yourself, and it goes to the kids, and it just becomes a cycle.
Yeah.
But the abuse guys I'm talking about, the abuse I'm talking about is not in areas of low income. They're in areas where the houses in those particular areas, three, four, five, $600,000 homes.
Jeez.
I know that's a shack on the street in California,
Yeah, I
but
can't even. That's what mobile homes are going for in California.
Yeah. Yeah.
but in Texas, you know, three, four, $500,000, you can get a pretty.
Oh, I've looked. Believe me. Now, just to push back on that a little bit, I just, I get that, and I would never slight a single mother for putting the effort in.
Oh, absolutely,
But
absolutely not.
I always go along with the saying, "It takes a village to raise a child," because I know from my personal experience, my mother and father were there. Obviously, that's been told, but my aunts and uncles also contributed, even with their own, even when they
Yeah,
had their own kids. My
yeah.
grandparents were
I
involved. My
experienced it.
grandmother drove me to a tournament one time. But my I think as part of the societal contract, I think we all should be involved. That's why I have no problem paying certain taxes that are going towards those situations like property
Right.
tax. Even if I didn't have children, property tax, this is the societal contract. They're going to have jobs.
That's an interesting mindset, and it's very important.
Well, that's the thing. 'Cause I mean, Flex knows I've also been a coach. I've done that thing, not just for my daughters, but again, that part of that societal contract or that group contract is that you're going to be a productive member of society, and that means helping when you can. And Flex knows, my wife was a political candidate at one point, and we did a lot of things within the community. We did a food drive because we know that no one should be hungry. I don't care what you did. And Flex also knows I am not anywhere near the most religious guy in the world, but I don't remember in my religious studies courses any Jesus or anybody ever asking to a to fill out a form to make sure you're doing what you need to be doing before he gave you help,
Mm.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And like with Q, what you're saying, it coming from a broken home and then being part of that because I didn't have marriages work out. Now I see it so clearly. Um, we have each our role. Men are the protectors, we're the providers. We lay down like the groundwork of you do's, you don't. The woman is the loving, the supporting, the caring, the nurturing, and that's the role. And when you break that family mold and you cause one to have to do more than this, it just wasn't meant to happen. Now, yeah, you do have some women who can rise to that, and you have some men like my brother, my oldest brother. He took on his kids. You have that, but that's just not the way the household and we were put here on this planet. Men were put here on this planet to carry that role. And like kind of like what your dad said, at the very essence, it is our fault. Now it's a different generation where you just have generational bad women, and they have what I call like men intentions. They seek to do sexual things where just you would only think a man would do that. You know, women are just, if you talk about a pure man and a pure woman, a woman just can't open her legs for anyone. A pure woman, she just can't. She's
Right,
not wired that way.
right.
A man can. So when I say women have men intentions, there's women out there now that seek to do those things.
And then
And
even that, what was that input to bring them to that place? Broken,
brokenness,
brokenness.
it's just, again, and it's so true. It's kind of like what you said, your grandfather had so many kids. When you said that, I'm like, good grief, my boy was fertile and active, you know. But the truth is, each generation is a lesser generation of the generation before. You go back to biblical times, whether you believe in the Bible or not, they walked for miles. No food, no water, and that was normal. They knew where they're going based on the stars. There was no outlines.
Yeah.
You know, they went for times without food. They worked hard. You look in the 1990s and building the skyscrapers, they're walking across those beams way up, sitting there just hanging and eating, just that mentality,
Yeah.
you know. So there's a weaker version. So when you think about the women, there's weaker versions of women. You have a woman who was born who didn't have her father there. She was mistreated. That daughter grows up into that life. She's a lesser woman. And now you have it to where like women just don't even care. I mean, you got scenarios where women are just killing their kids.
Yeah. And I want to clarify that we're not saying that, that women in those situations can't be great. We're just saying that the
That wasn't a role that they were supposed to take on.
yeah, it's not the role they're supposed to take on. Um, there's I'm generalization, is kind of a danger, but it's a fact. I just don't believe that the average female want to do it all by themselves, and I don't believe the average male wants to do it all by
I
themselves.
don't think anyone wants to do it by themselves.
No.
So
Some people want to do it together.
so it's like the end of the day, guys, and I'm open to anyone that has input in our comments. We have a issue in a lot of our communities. It's not all, it's not all. First thing people want to relate problems to like this, some of the abuse, they want to say that they're low income, uneducated,
Yeah.
all these stuff. The situation I'm talking about is not that.
Yeah.
One thing I learned, parents with money is just the kids are better at hiding it because they have resources. Is know that there are drugs and things in the lower income place, but guess what? They're just more sophisticated drugs in the areas where they have money to spend. They have multiple personalities. They have the personality around their parents, the personality around their friends, the personality they have when they're in school. Then they have a personality of being on social media.
And that's why I say at some point in time, it's that child's individual thought on what they're willing to do and what they're not willing to do.
Yeah.
And that just changes the spectrum of everything. We're just a supporting class. At some age, we can't spank them no more.
But that's my whole point, because the situation that we're dealing with now, the kids are 16, 17 years old. 16, 17 years old going through this type of physical engagement.
You're talking about the one that's been beaten?
Yeah, it's not just one situation. There's several situations that you have these, particularly now the boys are a little different. I mean, you have to be, if you're a mom trying to beat down a 16, 17-year-old boy, you got to deal with something different. You're gonna deal with something different. but a woman that's physically, bigger than her, their daughter, um, more knowledgeable about certain things and that type of aggression, and I'll say this, we are very open, guys. We don't have the solution. It's obvious we don't have the solution. The intent is to bring awareness about it, of what we call the input. The input that our kids are getting from the beginning and our participation in that. And I'm a firm believer that grandparents, you have an opportunity, if you didn't get it right, to participate in your children's life, in their kids as a grandparent, to help manage that input. But at the end of the day, we have abuse across the board on many different levels, and it just breaks my heart that so many young people that are teenagers that are experiencing this, and there are boys that have the same types of experiences with their fathers. There is what we have outlets a lot of times that people are not aware of, and in the future we're gonna start posting, some of these some resources to connect with. So look down in our description, you will see some resources. If you are a young person that's going through various stages of abuse, or you feel like you can't just make it another day. You're thinking about you're experiencing the cutting, you're experiencing the taking drugs or prescription pills or alcohol. I see all this happening, and guys, again, all these things that I'm seeing reflecting on, they are not in low income areas.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're not in low income areas. They're not, people that have blue collar jobs. These are white collar or professional type of situations that kids are experiencing, and everybody on the outside are not seeing what the children are going through.
But
So
that's
if
where
you know,
the,
go ahead.
that's where the community resources are going to be different. When that's where the financial side, because I know my daughters, they're going into their sophomore year in high school now, but we have them in a program where the entire high school student body is less than 400 total students. It's limited to 100 kids per graduating class. They have mentors that are at least 2 years older than them as part of the schooling process, and they have counselors to deal with these situations. And they have meetings where they talk about where the door is always open. You have situations you talk about not dealing with your parents or something else that you can't talk to your parents about to go talk to. And I know for a fact it's not in every community because it's not something that can be funded in every community.
Yeah, and displacement, I experienced those things with my uncles, with the elders in the church growing up. I mean, my uncle used to take me, talk to me, take me fishing. He had
That's
this,
that village I was talking about.
yeah, he, would talk to me about, the sports when he played, decisions he's made. He talked to me about being in the military. He, worked with me, paid me to, work with him, and, just kind of took that load and stress off my parents. Even people in the church used to take me to these things like the BTU Congress. I mean, just all these different things that people sold into my life. And I would tell you, in most of our neighborhoods, you don't even know your neighbors at all. I mean, I don't know, sometimes they come up, I know the neighbors at home because before they get there, the garage door is coming up. They drive the car in, the garage goes down. I'm that kind of guy. I go talk to everybody. I go talk to everybody. He might notice it. Dad, you talk to everybody. I was like, yeah, I talk to everybody. So I go visit the neighbors. Someone like, who this big black guy at my door? Well, I want you to know I'm here so you don't do something crazy talking about somebody walking through the neighborhood. But the reality is,
those resources, though, they not only have to be there, but those kids need to know that they're available and that there is help. And this is unfortunately where,
and like I said, a lot of them don't. They just
this
don't
is
know
what
there's a
these things
world
have made
outside
worse.
their.
Because
Yeah, they
now
don't
that
know
we're
there's a
on
world
this, now
outside
talk
their.
to people.
So what I'm gonna take away from this, and as we end it for today, is that if we found a way to put resources into the schools to make it a part of the communication, whether it be posters, whatever it is, letting them know, hey, this is your situation. You can anonymously call this space, because it's damaging our kids. If it's damaging our kids, it's damaging our future.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I mean,
And
it's
all
seriously,
self-inflicted wounds.
and it is my hope, is my prayer, is my wish, is that as Americans, I don't call it Japanese, I don't call it African American, I don't call it Asian American, I don't call it Hispanic American, German American. We are Americans. We in a place. I understand their background, but as a people, as a human, if we could find a way to try to get the best out of everybody, we understand that certain people, no matter what culture you come from, are not going to do well. But if we invest in resources into all these various groups, the stronger the education is, the more prepared our children are, the better chances we have to come back as a country.
Mm.
Because many of the things they're talking about reviving, that stuff is gone. Many of the jobs that are there, artificial intelligence is going to mean. I literally was about 5 or 6 years ago, as I was learning about machine learning and AI. I had this relationship where people in Saudi Arabia and other countries, they were having their elementary school kids get exposed to machine learning and AI 4 or 5, 6 years ago. Would pay good money for Americans and other people around the world to come in and teach their elementary school kids.
They're investing in their future, something that just we're not doing. And when we talk about it's not just a income or an intelligence bracket. I spoke at a few schools before, and I remember speaking at a school that my son and my daughter graduated from, and it was the students who were taking the pre-college classes already. Those,
Yeah.
so they're the smart ones. And me, I just popped up the question like, hey, how many of you guys have thought about taking your life? And I raised my hand first to let them know it was okay. It was like over half the students.
Dude, I've gone through that scenario. I've lived that life, grateful that, things are in a very different space. But kids talk about that kind of stuff all the time. So instead of taking their life, sometimes they get on the drugs. They start doing all kind of things
Numbing themselves. Yeah.
this
Yeah.
all this self-damaging,
Yeah.
which prolongs in the agony.
Yeah.
So we want to thank you guys for your time. Thank everybody that listened. Please give us feedback, give input. Ultimately, our goal is we operate from a space that we are humans, and we have a passion for wanting to support those who are dealing with mental health issues and those that are trying to get healthy like me.
Mm.
God bless you and have an amazing day.